Now we are with Dr. Yus Kenawas, a lecturer from Atmajaya Catholic University, Jakarta, and uh, he specialized in the political studies and democracy. And today we will discuss about the phenomenon of political dynasty, unpacking political families in global elections. To Dr. Yus Kenawas, please proceed with your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Miftah. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope my voice is clear enough because I have sore throat today. Uh, Allow me to speak slowly because um, I'm not sure how long my voice is gonna be there. Without further ado, let me share my screen and first of all, thank you for UMS for inviting me to be the speaker of this international short course. My name is Yos Kanawas, and I'm from Institute for Advanced Research at Universitas Katolik Indonesia Atmajaya in Jakarta. And today I'm going to present my topics on dynastic politics and election competitiveness. So this is our menu for today. I'm going to start with the definition of dynastic politics and political dynasty. And second, I will discuss a bit about dynastic politics in comparative perspective. Subsequently, I will also proceed with elaborating a bit of data on the rise of political dynasties in Indonesia. And I will try to explain why dynasty proliferate in post-Suharto Indonesia, and discuss a bit about the negative impacts of dynastic politics and what can we do to curb the spread of political dynasties. I will end my presentation with a conclusion. Miftah, my voice, can you hear my voice clearly?
Yes, it's clear enough.
Okay, please stop me if my voice is unbearable to your ears. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
So, what is dynastic politics? So, in my dissertation, I define dynastic politics as an attempt or effort to organize power to secure, maintain, and expand power positions in which the key individuals involved in the endeavor or attempt of dynasty building share familial ties, either by affinity or by consanguinity, by blood or by marriage. So dynastic politics is basic. Before we understand what is political dynasty, I think it is important to understand the verb that is dynastic politics, because we have to realize that political dynasty emerged not in a vacuum, but it's a conscious collective effort to organize power to secure, maintain, and expand power position. Power positions here refers to many things, start from the presidency, governorship, mayorship, even village head. It's also a definition of power position. So in this context, when you understand political dynastic politics involve power positions, then it can emerge everywhere, not only at the top level of the government, but even at the lowest level of government, you can have dynastic politics as long as there's a collective effort to secure power positions by individuals who are related by family ties. And as a consequence, I define political dynasty as a family-based political organization that aims to secure, maintain, expand power positions where relationship or of blood or marriage tie the core members. So if your father is a governor, and then you want to you aspire to be a mayor, then when your father helps you and you win the election, then a political dynasty emerge. Uh, so that's why in my dissertation I also set operational definition to limit the scope of political dynasty. I define political dynasty as or dynastic politicians as candidates whose predecessors have held elected offices in both the executive and legislative branches. So for example, if your mom is a member of parliament and you run for mayorship, then when you win the election, it means your family has transformed into a political dynasty. Of course, in a very ideal sense, a political dynasty should span more than one or two generations, like the Marcoses in the Philippines or the Kennedy in the United States. But in Indonesia case, because Indonesia just transitioned to democracy about 25 years ago, then the observation is quite limited. But you can observe the emergence of political dynasties almost everywhere, both at the national and subnational level. And just to discuss a bit about dynastic politics in other countries. So the political dynasties not only can be found in Indonesia, but also in other countries like the United States. You must be familiar with Kennedy's, with the Bushes, uh, and also in other countries like in India. In India, it spans over 4 generations. From the first generation is Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, and then followed by his daughter Indira Gandhi, and then the third generation was represented by Rajiv and Sonia Gandhi, and now it's the time for the fourth generation, Rahul Gandhi, who has been who has held the position of member of parliament since 2004. Uh, he's still struggling to defeat Narendra Modi, but it's still the Gandhi family has existed in India as a political dynasty since 1947. So it's long lineage of power for the Gandhi dynasty, even though at this moment they don't occupy the premiership. And political dynasties can also be found in Thailand, represented by the Shinawatras. If you followed the Thai political news, uh, we start with Thaksin Shinawat, who held the premiership from 2001 to 2006 before ousted by the military in 2006. But then his family made comeback through Yingluck Shinawat. Yingluck is Thaksin's sister, and now uh, she also got ousted by the military back in 2014. But now we have Petong Tan Chinawat. Petong Tan is Thaksin's daughter, who has held the premiership since 2024 until now. Other than Thailand, in Southeast Asia, we also have the Marcoses in the Philippines. Their actually their lineage of power was way back before Ferdinand Marcos. The most famous symbol of the Marcoses family, of course, the Ferdinand Marcos Sr., who was the president of the Philippines since from 1965 until 1986. And then Ferdinand Marcos' wife, Imelda Marcos, have also held the position in the legislative from 2010 to 2019. And now Ferdinand and Imelda's son, that is Bongbong Marcos, is the president of the Philippines from 2022 until now. There's it's not only so Marcos family not only limited to those with surname Marcos, but also with uh, with other surnames like if I'm not mistaken, it's Polwanko, who have familiar relations with the Marcoses. And of course, if we talk about Bongbong Marcos, we cannot uh, separate him from his VP, Sara Duterte, who is the daughter of Rodrigo Duterte, the previous president of the Philippines. And in Indonesia, dynasties exist at the national level. We know the House of Sukarno, the House of Suharto, and the House of Yudhoyono. Uh, mem- um, Members, except for the House of Suharto, now represented by Titi. The other families are still quite powerful at the national stage. One is now the Speaker of the House. I think he has held the position for 2 or 3 terms. And we also have Agus Harimurti Yudhoyono and Edi Baskoro Yudhoyono, or Ibas. And of course, in the past 5 years, a new dynasty emerged at the national level, and we should thank the people of Surakarta for the emergence of the Joko Widodo's family. And as we know, for the first time in our republic history, back in 2024, we have direct succession from Jokowi to Gibran. And not only Gibran, but Bobby and Kaisang also held important position in political parties or at the subnational level. This dynasty making by Jokowi is quite surprising, because back in 2018 they said they're not interested to build a political dynasty, but eventually all many family members of Jokowi become politicians and even held important positions today. And at the subnational level, of course, we have heard about the Koisias family. And even though today many of their members lost the elections, the Pilkada, the 2024 Pilkada, one family member of Ratu Atut Koisia, that is Pilar Saja Iksan, still win the deputy mayorship in Tangerang Selatan or South Tangerang. And the number of dynasty candidates at the national level, I'm talking about those who run in Pilkada, continue to increase from over time. We only have like 61 candidates between 2010 and 2014, but in the last election, in the 2024 Pilkada, we have 611 dynasty candidates. And this is a significant jump just over the period of a decade. So this is a quite serious problem for Indonesia's democracy, because the number of dynasty candidates, the significant surge of dynasty candidates in just over 10 years show indicates that our electoral landscape is increasingly being dominated by those who come from certain background, and that is in this case dynastic politicians. and the number of dynastic candidates who won Pilkada also continued to increase. If back in 2010 we only have 16 kepala daerah or executive heads, local executive heads who control local offices. Now now in 2024, of course in 2025, because they just get inaugurated, we already have 246 dynastic candidates who won Pilkada. So as you can see, the surge of the number of dynastic politicians indicates that uh, to some extent, Indonesia's electoral landscape at the subnational level is continued to be dominated by the royal bloods. And what causes the proliferation of political dynasties? Based on my study, there are at least four causes of the proliferation of political dynasties. First, and maybe this is very relevant to uh, if you are students of the Faculty of Law, it's gonna be quite relevant for you because there's no legal constraints to establish a political dynasty in Indonesia. So back in 2015, actually, we had an article, an anti-dynasty article in the law number 8, 2015 on subnational elections, article 7.R, that stipulated Indonesian citizens who can become candidates for governor and deputy governor, etc., and are those who satisfy the following requirements, have no conflict of interest with the incumbent. And conflict of interest here refer to not having blood ties, marital ties, and or lineage one level up, down sideways with the incumbent, namely father, mother, mother-in-law, uncle, aunt, brother, sister, brother-in-law, child, son-in-law, unless it has passed a break of one term of office. So basically, the article stipulated did not stipulate no if you're a member of if your family is a if you're related with the incumbent, uh, it doesn't mean you cannot run for political office, for elected office, but you have to wait for one term, and then you can join the subsequent election. This article was intended to prevent any abuse of power by the incumbent, because in many cases, of dynasty building, the incumbent abuse their power, mobilize their subordinates, mobilize the aparatus sipil negara, the public officials, and state budget to help their family members in elections. But then, uh, back in 2015, a number of relatives of incumbents at that time petitioned the Constitutional Court, and the MK or Constitutional Court eventually annulled or canceled the anti-dynasty clause in 2015 because they argued that the clause was against the Article 28 of the Indonesian Constitution. MK argued that the anti-dynasty clause was discriminative and violated citizens' political rights. Basically, MK agreed with the petition or with the argument of the dynastic politicians who filed their case at the Constitutional Court. How about in other countries? In other countries, actually, there are legal constraints to form a political dynasty in other countries. So in the Philippines, for example, Article 2, Section 26 of the 1987 Constitution stipulates the state shall guarantee equal access to opportunities for public service and prohibit political dynasties as may be defined by law. Please highlight that the key is may be defined by law. So even though the Constitution said political dynasty is prohibited, but as long as the constitution article is not translated into a law, you can still build a political dynasty. The problem is this Article 2, Section 26 never materialized into law because the majority of the Philippine Congress members are dynastic politicians. So they block every attempt to pass the bill into law. And in other countries, they clearly stipulated the anti-dynasty clause in the constitution. For example, in Costa Rica, Article 132.3 stipulates the following may not be elected: president or vice president. One of them are whoever is by consanguinity or affinity an ancestor, descendants, or sibling of the persons occupying the presidency of the republic when effecting the election, or of whoever perform it in any interval within the 6 months preceding that date. So basically, the idea is the same. If your family member is an incumbent, you cannot run for the same position for the presidency in this case at in direct succession manner. You have to have some break on the presidential power, then you can join the election. In other countries, in El Salvador, in Paraguay, we can also find quite similar anti-dynasty clause in their constitution. You can read the details here, but the point is, in some other countries in Latin America with a history of authoritarianism, some of them have similar legal arrangements to prevent the formation of political dynasties. These include Colombia, Guatemala, Nicaragua, and Panama. So if you're a student of the Hukum Tata Negara or the State Administrative Law, you may want to pay attention to this comparative list of constitutions around the world that prohibit the formation of political dynasties. And the second reason why political dynasties keep emerging in Indonesia is because there's no transparent selection and nomination process in political parties. There's a mutual symbiosis between political parties and dynastic politicians. Both of them, it takes two to tango, right? So both political parties and dynastic politicians, they need each other. Political parties need dynastic politicians because they're proven to be a very effective vote getters. And they also need political dynasties to fund the party's operation or fund the party's campaign during elections. And dynastic politicians need political party because they need the party's endorsement in elections. Although technically they can run as an independent, but the cost of running as an independent is much higher compared to running as party-backed candidates. So for political parties, the logic is if you want to nominate someone in election, you have to pay attention to the three tasks in Indonesia's term. First is popularitas, electabilitas, and the last one is itas. And usually the one who have these capabilities are dynastic politicians. And moreover, what is more important is party's nomination, party's decision to nominate someone during election is decided by a small group of elites within the party. So it's a very closed door, black box process with minimum participation from the party members, from the rank and file party members, let alone the public. Excuse me. The third reason why political dynasties keep emerging in Indonesia is because Indonesian voters actually tolerate the practice of dynastic politics. So I did a survey back in 2020 because at that time there were some surveys that uh, concludes Indonesian voters are allergic to political dynasties. But I question that argument because if Indonesian voters are allergic to dynastic politics, why the number of political dynasties winning election keep increasing over time? So I changed the survey questions by asking if the local elections where you live were held today, how likely would you vote for the candidate related to the incumbent or past region mayor or governor? The result indicates that they not automatically voters are not automatically reject the political dynasties or dynastic politicians. As you can see, most of the voters uh, put give their said that are, are, um, are in the middle position. They're on the fence. They're not uh, automatically will vote for dynastic politicians, but more importantly, they also not automatically reject dynastic politicians. And even the number of those who are more likely to vote for dynastic politicians are bigger compared to those who say they're less likely to vote for dynastic politicians. And another survey by Indicator back in 2023, just after the nomination of Gibran as the VP candidate, also shows that majority of the voters believes directly elected dynastic politicians do not threaten democracy. So the survey asked the respondents which of the following statements best describe your opinions. First is dynastic politics is not an issue as long as the people continue to elect their leaders directly, or despite being directly elected by the people, dynastic politics will undermine democracy. And the majority of the voters said dynastic politics is not a problem as long as the people continue to elect their leaders directly. And this finding and the dynastic politicians exploited this situation by normalizing the practice of building political dynasties. So, for example, Jokowi said, as you as we can see in the previous slides, Jokowi normalized the dynastic politics by saying the ones who choose are the people, those who decide are the people, those who vote are the people, not the elites, not the parties. That is democracy. That's according to Jokowi. This is for me to for an attempt made by politicians to normalize dynastic politics. And the last reason why dynastic politics keep emerging in Indonesia is because the low cost of conducting electoral fraud. Electoral fraud, to be sure, is not only exercised by dynastic politicians. Many non-dynastic politicians also involved in electoral fraud, especially vote buying and mobilization of the state apparatus. And despite the fact that those kind of electoral fraud has been public knowledge, the MK still overwhelmingly rejected cases of electoral fraud. As you can see in this table, of 1,136 registered cases between 2008 to 2022 of Pilkada disputes, MK rejected 495 of them and did not accept the claim of the other 509 disputes. MK only granted 87 cases, and most of these cases are did not ended with um, the disqualification of candidates, but only revote in some polling stations. And throughout MK history, MK only disqualified Pilkada winner in two cases, in Kota Waringin Barat and in Bengkulu Selatan. And but only in Kota Waringin Barat, the MK disqualified the winner because of the structured, massive, and systematic fraud. In Bengkulu Selatan is for other cases not related with electoral fraud. So when this suggests that the cost of conducting electoral fraud is quite cheap for politicians' calculation. Yes, in terms of value, monetary value, it can be quite high, but in terms of overall gain, uh, they don't have any barriers or hesitancy to engage in or to deploy electoral fraud because they know the possibility for their victory if they win the election, the possibility of their victories being overturned by the constitutional court is very slim. It's extremely slim. So, um, uh, and even though it's practiced by both dynastic and non-dynastic politicians, for dynastic politicians they have more power because the incumbent, for example, control the state apparatus and state budget. So yeah, this is the final causes, the final cause why dynastic politicians keep emerging in Pilkada. And what are some of the negative impacts of dynastic politics? There are three negative impacts of dynastic politics. First, it weakens party institutionalization. So it perpetuates obscure intra-party decision making, and which resulted in unproven and inexperienced candidates being nominated as a kepala daerah, and as a result, with unproven and inexperienced candidate, you will have subpar policy decisions, right? You can also talk about dynastic politicians become puppet of their predecessors. And what is more concerning is dynastic politics actually discourage non-dynastic cadre to build a career in political party. And the second negative impact of dynastic politics is it obstructs development. There's no conclusive study in Indonesia yet, but based on several studies in Japan and in the Philippines, dynastic politicians can bring, for example, in Japan, dynastic politicians can bring more money to their regions, but fail to improve overall development because money for that they secure from the central government goes for clientelistic practices. They only targeted the loyalists of political dynasties, and so consequently, there's no overall development in the region controlled by political dynasties. And in the Philippines, Mendoza et al. Find that political dynasties actually worsen poverty in resource-rich non-Luzon provinces. And the last one is dynastic politics is highly associated with network corruption. In many cases, dynasties are not merely a political network, but also a corruption network. We have some examples in Indonesia. For example, corruption cases involving politicians are Alex Nurdin and Lodi Reza Alex in South Sumatra, Asrun and Adriatma in Kendari. Kendari is in Southeast Sulawesi, and Hasan Aminuddin and Puputan Trianasari in Probolinggo. In some of these cases, so Alex Nurdin and Mirza Alex Nurdin were convicted for two different corruption cases. But Asrun and Adriatma, Hasanuddin and Puputan Trianasari, the KPK arrested them because they collude to enrich themselves by using the power held by one of the family members to enrich their personal wealth. In Banten, although it's not involving active public officials, but the husband of Irene Rahmidiani, who is Ratu Atut's brother, actually get the. So there are, for some people in Banten, they said there are two governors in Banten during Ratu Atut's regime. The day governor is Ratu Atut, but the evening governor or the night governor is Wawan, who actually arranging all the corruption in Banten by using his sister power. And what should we do with this situation? What should we do, or what can we do actually to deal with the issue of dynasty politics? Excuse me. So first, we can try to reinsert the anti-dynasty clause in election laws. I think right now the Kemendagri, the Ministry of Home Affairs, working with some civil society organization, are discussing about the reforming the election laws. We can try to reinsert the anti-dynasty clause in the election laws. However, I think it will be difficult because one, more dynasty politicians in the DPR. So I think it will receive strong rejections from the DPR. And second, again, political parties need dynasty politicians for the reasons that I have mentioned earlier. And third, the MK will likely to annul the anti-dynasty clause because, again, they argue that this clause is not democratic and violates citizens' rights. But I think if we can show the devastating impact of dynastic politics and show that in other countries, in other democratic countries, they also adopt the same clause and it's still democratic, it's still considered democratic. I think we can make a case to the MK. But again, before we go to the MK, the first two obstacles need to be overcome by everyone who wants to reinsert the anti-dynastic clause in the election laws. So, assuming that we cannot have the anti-dynasty clause in election laws, what can we do? If that's the case, then we can 100% prohibit dynastic politicians from running in elections. What we could do is to make them compete on a moral level playing field and force them to become less predatory. How can we do that? First, I think we should introduce the minimum years requirement as an active party cadre prior to nomination. In this case, if we can force them to prove their track record in the party, I think we can avoid calon karbitan or someone who get promoted really quickly 1 year before election, 6 months before elections, just because he or she is a relative of party elites or incumbents. So they have to prove themselves first in the party, build the party from below, and only after that they can be nominated as a candidate in elections. Second is to force political parties to adopt a more transparent selection and nomination processes. We can try to imitate the caucus or primary system, like what we have in the United States. And third one is improve the capacity and power of the election supervisory body. And last one, I think this is very radical ideas. Uh, and if you are a student of law, you may want to pay attention to this, because I think we should abandon the principles of structured, massive, and systematic in judging electoral fraud, because election fraud is, in many cases, election fraud are not structured. In many cases, they're not massive, maybe in only in selected areas. And third, it may be not systematic as we would have thought. So I think if we can abandon the principles of structured, massive, and systematic in judging election fraud, the cost to conduct election fraud will increase. But again, if you are a student of law, you may want to discuss that, debate this with your peers. And what about introducing indirect election system? I think indirect election system is not the answer, because this, as the record says, despite the increasing number of dynastic politicians participating in local elections, their success rate continues to decline. In 2024, out of 600 plus members of political dynasties who competed in the elections, only 246 won the election. The rest, 365, lost their bid in the last Pilkada. So Pilkada still offers the best chance for voters to overthrow political dynasties. If we change the system into an election system, then it's gonna be cheaper for dynasty candidates to build their political dynasties. They only need to drive or to buy the votes of maybe like 50, 100 members of local parliaments, and then they can win elections. If their party can control maybe like 50% of the local parliaments, it's even easier to build political dynasties. So indirect election system, as proposed by the Minister of Home Affairs, Tito Karnavian, is not the answer to end the proliferations of political dynasty. So to conclude, I've shown that in my presentation, dynastic politics exists in other democracies. The number of dynastic candidates keep increasing in Indonesia, so that's the number of dynastic candidates who win elections. I've also shown you the 4 causes of the proliferations of political dynasties. And I also argued in my presentation just now, there's no shortcut to deal with the issue of dynastic politics. And indirect election system will not only reduce the cost of, will only reduce the cost of establishing political dynasties. You may want to ask, what's the difference between political dynasties in Indonesia from those of American dynasties, for example. In Indonesia, the political dynasties are not associated with certain values that certain values believed by some members, some segments of the community. So Indonesian political dynasties, they're non-ideological. They may portray themselves as ideological, but actually they're not. It's all about pragmatism. In the States, Yes, there's a political dynasties, but the ways in which they rise to power is not as fast as we have in Indonesia. In the States, Jeb Bush can lose from Donald Trump in the party nomination. Also in the States, if you are a Bush family or if you're a Clinton family, your family name will be associated with certain policies. If you're Bush, then your policy will likely uh, follow Republican values, Republican Party values. If you're Clintons, then your policies may most likely follow the Democratic Party values, the Democrat values. So that's not the case in Indonesia. And with that, I end my presentation. Thank you again for your kind attention, and I hope I am happy to answer your question if there's any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yus Kenawas, for your insightful lecture. So to the all participants, you are free to ask the speaker by writing your question in the chat room, or you may ask directly. Okay. If there's no questions, maybe I want to ask you, Dr. Yus. I have one funny questions. Sorry if my question is meaningless, but based on the past experience, Indonesia was once consisted from several kingdoms and once a federal state. Uh, in your opinion, is it possible for Indonesian government to return to the past? I mean, which means it's becoming a federal state or a kingdom. Let's just say this could really happen. What's your opinion?
Okay, thank you for your question, and I think it's a very good question, not a meaningless one. So first, I will separate my answer to two parts. So first, there are some who argue that the proliferation of Indonesian political dynasties was caused because of our national histories, that consisted of several kingdoms, right? So why not replicating that kind of that's part of our culture basically. The argument said that that's part of our culture. We are part. We used to be. We used to consist of several kingdoms, but I don't think this argument makes sense because in some areas where members of the uh, royalty competed in elections, they lost the elections. So it's not about because of our national history that the political dynasties proliferate in Indonesia. That's the first point. And second, you're asking about will we return to the um, kingdomship or federal states. I don't think that's not the case. I don't think it's going to be happening as long as we have the direct election system. We still have the chance to overthrow political dynasties. And what about federalism? I think federalism is another F word in Indonesia political discourse. We tried that back in 1950s, but then every time we tried to revive the idea of federalism, uh, candidates will reject that idea for and arguing that it's it's going to break our national unity. But are we going to be controlled by raja-raja kecil in the daerah, in the regions? Yes, I think that's a possibility that some families can be very powerful in the regions. The Atut family in Banten is one example. But again, this pilkada teach us a lesson that no dynastic politics is immune from national intervention. No dynastic politics is immune from losing their power. So there's a lot of causes why why dynastic politicians can lose election. National power interventions is one of the causes. The other is the rejection of the local people. So I think what we need is keep spreading the information about the danger of dynastic politics. Yes, we can argue that some dynastic politicians or some political dynasties can be benevolent. They some of them can be can bring more development to their regions, but the statistical data just don't support that argument. That's gonna be uh, if there are cases where dynastic politicians can be benevolent or bring development in the regions, it's an anomaly in statistical data. It's not the general pattern. So that's my answer to your question, Mufta.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is from Ms. Giza. In Indonesia, are there any examples of newcomers defeating the strong candidates from political dynasties? What are the factors of their success? Do these newcomers perform better than the candidates from political dynasties?
Yeah, thank you, Giza, for your question. So I think there are some cases, but so far, so one case is from North Sulawesi, from Sulawesi Utara. Eli Nasut is one of the politicians with high popularity prior to the elections, high electability prior to the elections, lost from Julius something, but his loss was caused due to national power intervention, not because of the other candidates is better than this dynastic politician. In Banten also, uh, I lost from Andra Sony, but Andra Sony's deputy is a patriarch of another dynasty. So it's a cause of dynasty replacing another dynasty. And in Serang, for example, Ratu Atutsan Andika Hazrumi lost the election, but he lost to the wife of Menteri Desa, the village minister, Yandri, who we know that actively mobilizing the village apparatuses in Kabupaten Serang to help the victory of Yandri's wife. So there are cases back in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, in South Sulawesi, Professor Burhanuddin Abdullah, if I'm not mistaken his name, defeated dynastic candidates in the South Sulawesi gubernatorial election. But then in last election, Professor Burhanuddin promoted his son to be I think a regent of one of the regencies in South Sulawesi. So there are some examples of newcomers, non-dynasty candidates defeating political dynasties. I think in Sragen is another case as well. Non-political dynasty defeated a member of political dynasties, and are they better than are they perform better than the candidates from political dynasties? I don't know. But I think the key here is how they can ensure the people not to keep voting for dynastic politicians. And it requires a lot of organizations, a lot of mobilizations, and unfortunately, not all people can do that. That's my answer, Giza.
Okay, thank you. There are two more questions, but this from Ms. Safa Abdullah. What kind of merit-based system should be established in government to mitigate the potential of negative impact of political dynasties?
Mm, I'm not an expert in administrative and bureaucracy, basically, but one of the argument is how can we isolate the bureaucracy from politicians? In Singapore, for example, politicians can can be ministers, but they cannot just instruct their subordinates to follow the minister's order. The subordinates will likely to um, they have a mechanism, if I'm not mistaken, called permanent secretary, who is a bureaucrat, a career bureaucrat, who headed the ministry, and he or she is the one who can direct the bureaucracy to move to a certain direction. So I think the key is how can we find a system or a way how to isolate the bureaucracy the uh, from the political interests. And to be honest, I don't have answer to that question. And it's a $1 million question for any comparative is how can we isolate the bureaucracy from political interference. And in Indonesia's case, as long as your promotion is still decided by the governor or by the bupati or by the wali kota, as long as the governor and the bupati and wali kota is still um, the chief of bureaucracy, I think that's unavoidable. So we have to make those executive leaders uh, not the chief of the bureaucracy. And I think to do that, we need to once again overhaul our constitutions, overhaul the undang-undang ASN, for example, overhaul the hubungan pusat daerah law, and many laws. And it's going to be very difficult and very challenging task to do. Yeah.
Okay, maybe one last question from Ms. Sukmareni Rajab. Some time ago, we were shown a video by Secretary General of PDIP, Hasto Kristianto, about how Jokowi prepared and found security for Gibran Rakabuming and Bobby, which it's further clarified the problem of political dynasties in Indonesia. What do you think about this? Does it reinforce existing or assumptions? Thank you.
I think what Hasto said is just another confirmation of what we have known so far about Jokowi's dynasty making. I would say that yes, he is not the first one who built political dynasties. But if you ask me who is the father of dynastic politics of Indonesia, I think Jokowi is the father of dynastic politics in Indonesia. So that's my short answer to your question, Sukma.
Okay, thank you. One more questions. It's from Shukron Ansori. How do you assess the current situations of Indonesian officials who arise from political dynasties, particularly in light of their perceived limited competence?
Mm,
Mhm.
I think I may want to. So I'm not saying that all dynasties are bad, right? Some of them actually prove themselves that they can be independent of their predecessors' influence. For example, in Banyuwangi, I think Ipu did a great job in continuing the development in Banyuwangi. So not all political dynasties are incompetence. But again, the questions of competency can only be proven once they rule or once they run the government. The simple logic is if you don't have experience in running government or in bureaucracy or involved in policy debates, how can you create sound fact-based policies that will benefit the people rather than your own family? And I think although uh, we have to put skepticism not only to dynastic politicians but also to non-dynastic leaders. But I think the weight of uh, we have to put double skepticisms or even triple skepticisms towards dynastic politicians. So if they can get a fast track nomination and victory in the election, they also have to prove themselves twice or even three times better than non-dynastic politicians. Only by that we can quote unquote make peace with what with their karbitan process. That's my answer. I'm sorry. Thank you. It's a very good question.
Okay, thank you. I think we have reached our end of the lecture. I would like to express my gratitude to Dr. Yos Kenawas for his outstanding presentation and to all participants for your active engagement. But before we close today's sessions, maybe Dr. Yos Kenawas, you want to give any closing statement?
Maybe my maybe yeah we just we need to assess the performance of dynastic politicians. We need to be skeptical of their capability to lead uh, twice or triple than non-dynastic politicians because they get their nomination uh, fast track basically. And I think there's a lot of issues, as I mentioned in my presentation, that worth to be discussed by law students, by law school students on uh, the benefit and or the benefit or um, the advantages or disadvantages of having anti-dynastic laws and find a way how can we combat the proliferation of political dynasties using legal instruments. If let's say if Gibran can uh, be nominated, can get his nomination through uh, a university student who petitioned the constitutional court, I think we can also try. We can also imagine a day where a university student, maybe from UMS, law school student from UMS, petition the MK to reintroduce the anti-dynastic clause.
Amin.
I mean, so thank you for your kind attention, everyone. And sorry for the voice. I'm losing my voice here.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Yos Kenawas. With that, I think we officially can close today's international short course. I hope this discussion has been beneficial for all of us. And to Dr. Yos Kenawas, I hope we will meet again in another event. As a moderator, I apologize if there are any errors or in delivery and or pronunciations.
No, you're
Thank
good.
you very much. Uh, we can close our lecture today. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Miftah.
Thank
You
you,
did great.
Mr.
You did
Yus
great.
Kinawas.
Thank you. Bye bye.